All right, welcome to this kind of sad, but not in any way unexpected video to discuss the ending for Star Wars X-Wing as well as Armada. So, AMG. We'll get to FFG in the future, but AMG announced as of time of recording, like 2 hours ago or so, that they are stopping development on X-Wing as well as Armada. I want to take a look at what they said. I want to talk about, our interpretations of all of that, what that means from here, what that means for you maybe as a player, and everything around it. So let's take a look at that. I saw this. It came up when I was teaching. I was giving the students a little bit of time to work on something, so I took a quick look around online, and I saw this ended up being posted up. So this is after long and careful consideration, we are here today to announce the end of development of Star Wars X-Wing and Star Wars Armada. We are grateful for the community's passionate engagement and support. Over the past few years, rising production costs, global manufacturing, and pandemic-related challenges have made it increasingly difficult to produce high-quality, pre-painted miniatures, which ultimately led to the decision to end development. Although development is ending, we're not stepping away from these games entirely. AMG will continue to support tournaments and organize play for both games. There's going to be OP kits at local shops, and there'll be Worlds at Adepticon next year, 2025. And they thank us for all of our support. So, a few things I want to say. Let's do a little bit of a very super brief timeline to give some level of all this. So, originally both these games were under FFG, Fantasy Flight Games. So originally, Fantasy Flight had a lot of the big miniatures or gaming IPs. So they had the Star Wars one, all of that. X-Wing itself came out in about 2012, I believe, right around like Adepticon sort of time. And then Star Wars Armada was about 2015. It was about 3 years later. Armada is obviously the big ships. X-Wing was mostly the small ships, except for when they did Epic and they did a couple big ships, which I used to have a bunch of those. They were great. Fast forward to about 2020, and that is when AMG took over. So both companies are owned by Asmodee. Asmodee effectively moved all of its miniature games that were underneath of its umbrella, so FFG games, and shipped them all to AMG. The idea was that way FFG could focus more on what they believed they were better at. I'm not saying they're not, but what the belief was they were better at, which was more of things like card games or actual role-playing games. They broke up separately too, but more like card games, board games, all those sort of properties. And they wanted a company that was going to do all the miniatures for them. At that moment, AMG was known for having Marvel Crisis Protocol. That was their own baby that they put together. And then they were a very small studio. I think they're still quite small, but they were then saddled with 3 different Star Wars lines. They had X-Wing, Armada, and Legion. Fast forward now to 2024. A couple, I think at the time of this, a few weeks back, maybe within the last month or so, people noticed that Asmodee stopped selling X-Wing and Armada on its web store. You couldn't buy it anymore. It was all sold out. Where there was product before, it wasn't truly sold out. So there was back and forth of what that actually meant. They let it kind of sit for multiple weeks without telling us. I would say going through different community things, there was a good amount of the community that felt that meant the games were over. There's also a good amount of the community that kind of thought like, oh, maybe, okay, there might be production issues. Maybe they're doing like, this is around the time a lot of companies end fiscal years. So maybe they were stopping it so they could actually get accurate counts and, to kind of close out the books for the year. I know at least in my job, this is pretty close to that. So there was a lot of talk and belief. And as someone who played a lot of Armada, I remember back 2016, 2017, around there, I played a bunch. I played in every store championship I could find. I would play as casually as much as I could find, but honestly, it wasn't that big where I was. There was a couple of us who really liked it, but otherwise I went to all the different store champs that year. Like I said, 2016, I think 2017 as well or so. I could be off by about a year on exactly when it occurred. I remember I had all the different acrylic for all of that. But over time, you didn't see many people play it. Biggest problem they had for quite a while is there just wasn't releases. If you go through and look at all the releases, the game kind of went away a while ago for all intents and purposes. So if we take a look on, this is one of the wikis that has all this stuff here. You can scroll through and see that, okay, the game came out, I said 2015, I want to say it was. announced in 2014, came out 2015. Core set. Okay, hey, a couple months later, first wave with a whole bunch of stuff. Later that year, next wave, whole bunch of stuff. So the first year, they got lots and lots of ships. And from then, you're looking at November till August. So better part of a year. Not exactly, but you're looking 8, 9 months, depending on that. Announced early, but taking a while. And so that's August. I guess that was, those two waves were pretty close to each other. But then you start looking at, okay, a couple more months, another about half of a year, another half of a year or more, year or so. They started getting more and more spread out. And actually later on, they decided to start releasing other factions, but it never really got any further. They came out with some extra factions in December, May, a little bit more, and then it kind of stopped. I know at least with the newer factions, a lot of people were concerned of would they get enough to kind of fill out or flush out a faction. I remember when we got, I believe it was when the Honor Journal that came out, there was like a year plus between seeing anything released. So for Star Wars Armada, at least, I don't think anyone is terribly surprised by this. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised they kept it going as long as they did. And that's someone who absolutely loves this game. I always said Armada was the best game that you're not playing. People did. But when you talk to people, when people would tell me, like, oh, what's your favorite game? What's this? It was usually always Star Wars Armada. I absolutely love that game. I thought it was great. It had some of its problems, but honestly, especially for a space game, that was one of my absolute favorites. And I've played a lot of space games. I've done Battlefleet Gothic. I've done Firestorm Armada, all the different ones that are out there. This was still always one of the top ones for me. Absolutely. But it struggled. It struggled with releases for years, and then it stopped getting releases. I said that last release, actual release, other than like some little card packs and all, you're looking at now going on like 3+ years, like 4 years. What was that? 2021. So actually at this point, about 3 solid years with nothing. Now, when they took over, they did say at one point that they weren't currently working on anything new. And if they weren't working on anything new, timeline, for anyone who's not familiar, timeline between coming up with a concept to getting a model to you is about 3 years. Different things can be faster or shorter, but that's pretty much the timeline that they've said. And a lot of industry experts have kind of said that as well. That's about a 3-year cycle. So when they told us a couple of years ago, they weren't actually working on anything new, that means if they decided to, you weren't going to say anything until like next year anyway. We switch over to the idea for X-Wing. Like I said, X-Wing came back in 2012, had tons and tons of releases, had a lot more, partially because there's a lot more small ships. Armada had a problem. It's the big ships. There's not as many. Or at least not as many that are like canon currently that are known and all of that. X-Wing has its first edition, goes through a total and utter revamp for 2.0, which it desperately needed because 1 was just becoming a quagmire, honestly. 2.0, they give you some update packs. You can do all of that. And then you are good to go. They started adding rotation in. So they said, hey, you know what? Not all the ships all the time. Hey, some of the ships are extended. Some of them, so essentially some are tournament legal, some aren't. For the beginning, the ones that were tournament legal were the ones that hadn't been re-released yet. But even as they started releasing, they want to do more seasons, which I thought was good. And then they still had somewhat the same thing. You start seeing less and less releases over time for this. The last couple of years, honestly, looking through it, I haven't kept up with X-Wing quite as much, but looking through it, I couldn't find like many releases that weren't just either re-releases or greatly delayed or bits here and there. I know some of the more recent ones, I know they've had to make some pretty big changes, partially because of probably less play testing and all of that. I know they completely redesigned the way they did the game. Instead of like the old 100-point style squads, now you're looking at 20-point squads. Instead of just taking whatever upgrades you want, now you come with a fixed amount of upgrade points. So your ship might be 4 points and get 7 upgrade points, and it tells you what types of upgrades you can take, and you put that on there rather than... So you're still paying for the things, but you're paying it differently. Character type ones come a little bit more fixed. If you're a named special character, you might come exactly fixed with everything you have. So you lost a lot of build freedom. I know they started doing scenarios. That's something I always wanted. I thought X-Wing would always have a problem until it came up with some scenarios, because just dogfights sooner or later, I think, becomes a little too much. I think dogfight, if you want, I think it's great to have that. But I like the idea of scenarios personally. I want to have a purpose to play. That's just me, though. But we started seeing less and less and less. So they weren't coming out with the releases, or at least not many. At least, I'll put it this way. Some of my friends that I talk to and game with and stuff like that are huge X-Wing players. This was the game they started with. This was the game they played. They played on TTS when it was available. If they went over to his houses, they were playing X-Wing, and then went into the store, it was X-Wing. And I don't hear much about it much anymore from any of them. Actually, I was just at a Shatterpoint tournament the weekend, and one friend was mentioned. I was like, oh, what's going on with X-Wing? He's like, hasn't really touched as much since with some of the changes they did, with some of the, I guess, maybe lack of new things, or just an overall much more malaise from a lot of people who were dedicated to this game. I'm not saying they're still not big fans, and I'm not saying there's not a lot of people who love the current edition, the way they're doing it, but I heard more gripes than I heard positives to say. I honestly, in 2.5, didn't really get a chance to play it. I have a bunch of X-Wing, actually. I have a bunch of Separatist stuff. Just haven't played it in a while. It stopped being really popular where I am. Same thing with Armada. I sold out of Armada, probably about 2020. I took all the Armada I had, and I sold it to a guy for tons and tons of Separatists for Legion. I got about the equivalent of about 3,000 points worth of Legion for it, which was a bit more popular. I don't play Legion that much anymore. There's tons of other games, but X-Wing, I mean, that stuff up there I haven't touched in, oh God, probably 4 years or more. I'll keep up with news, and I'll keep up with things that are interesting. And, I kind of putzed around with a little of it when they did some of the missions just to try them out. But like actually play? No, it's been years. So what does their announcement really mean? We knew they weren't working on anything for Armada. That was well known. Everyone knew that. X-Wing, I personally don't know if I saw that being a thing, that they were going to stop production. I kind of thought, that they have new shows they're doing quite a bit often, and maybe it's not the moneymaker of the past. They kind of mentioned that, that money is a thing for this. I do think its popularity went way down with a lot of their changes that they made. And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that it went away. I'm surprised it went away at the same time. I thought maybe Armada, and then they would try to do something with X-Wing. But maybe their thought is just, rip the Band-Aid all at once. But once they took it out of the web store, it made sense. Whatever they were going to do was probably going to affect both. And honestly, I kind of wasn't entirely sure what would happen, but I kind of thought you might see something, because if they're going to stop showing Armada and X-Wing at the same time, it probably means something. And it turns out, unfortunately for anyone who plays it, does. I want to, before we get into other thoughts here, I do want to mention for anyone who, if this is the games that you played, it sucks. It hurts. I've been through plenty of games that were ripped away. Honestly, a bunch of them from FFG. And this originally was FFG, but also when Spartan Games went under, all of that. So I've played many a game that has languished and then been removed, or say like Guild Ball, seeming to do really well and then was just ripped away. So if you are, hurt or offended by any of this, I completely get it. I completely understand. This is, for many people, this was the game they played. They love Star Wars. There's a lot of people where X-Wing was the only miniatures game they wanted to do, partially because they love Star Wars, pre-painted. You can just go out, you can reenact the movies, all of that. You can, do the shows, anything you want. And effectively it's gone. So here's what I want to say related to that. One, there's always two camps when this happens to a game. And now I know they said they're not done supporting it, but let's face it, if you're not going to like organize play stuff, then none of that matters. If your goal is to play a bunch of ships, there's always two avenues. There's the avenue of, I have all my stuff, I can just keep playing. Yes, you absolutely can. The same way as when Warhammer Fantasy went away, which I was a big Warhammer 8th edition player. When that went away, people came out with something called 9th Age. They updated the rules from 8th and kept going. And now we have Old World, so we kind of have GW's version of exactly that. But no one's going to come in and take your models. You can keep playing. And if you have a good group, a good support network of players, you have maybe either personal support or store support, all those sorts of things, keep going. However, the part that always makes that tough, and the part why I don't want to say when a game officially, goes away that I stop ever playing it, but I don't really look at it much anymore. And the reason is simple. You are going to start to struggle to get new people in. I don't know if they're going to sell any of it more. They said sold out on everything. I don't know. If they still have stock left over, I think they're going to try to get rid of the stock. I can't imagine they don't try it. That just sounds like weird to me that they would just leave a whole bunch of it and not do anything with it. Unless for some reason that's the most fiscally responsible thing. But even if that's the case, wherever it's stored, they could just sell it in that country. Who knows? But at some point, you're not going to really find it anymore. Right now, I know for a fact that some Armada ships go for 2, 3, or more times what the MSRP is, because they didn't produce it much. Part of the problem, especially FFG had this, I'm sure AMG had the same sort of thing, or Hausen or Asmodee, was that, okay, here are these releases. Well, we need to do these reprints of other ones, but we don't have, infinite resources. So we got to wait until some other things are done to get to those reprints. So if we happen to sell out of this, you might not be able to get it for quite a while. I remember for Armada, I picked up, I want to say it was, might have been like the Phoenix Home or something like that, one of those ships. And then it was out of stock forever. So I picked up like one, and I was interested in getting more and just couldn't do it. That you couldn't find it, and I was going to pay the huge amounts. I know they did that for the, which one was it? It's going to bug me until I figure out which ship it is. So, transport set was an issue, and MC-30s. I remember for a while, MC-30s were great, and you just couldn't find them. Same thing with Gladiators. I know Gladiators was a super long time where you couldn't find a Gladiator if you wanted one. So there will come a time when you're just not going to be able to really find it. Now, okay, you can go to 3D print your ships and all that stuff. Sure, you can do all of that. But for official product, which if you're not like a gamer, if you just love Star Wars and you want to play some Star Wars stuff, that might not be the option that you're thinking of. Those players may not. So there will come a time when you're not really going to be able to find it or be able to find it for reasonable prices. There will be other games that come out. You will start losing. Realistically, you're probably going to start losing some store support. I know, at least in a lot of the stores I play in, what games do they kind of push to the forefront are the games that they're selling. And they're doing it because they're a store. They have to stay open. I will never begrudge a store from wanting to push the games that it has to make money with. But that also means that if they're not really getting this up much anymore, or if people are dropping away because the game is effectively gone, or, however you want to put it, then they're not really going to support as much anymore. You might start losing some of those particular game nights you had. Other games might go in its place. So you're going to find it harder to kind of keep it going. It's not impossible. If you actually look around, Battlefield Gothic still has a lot of support and a lot of people who play it. I know there's like 2 different versions out there right now. There's whole Discord servers full of thousands upon thousands of people. But like I said, it's not mainline, but you can still do it. I know Blood Bowl, I know GW brought it back, but Blood Bowl never really went away. There were some groups that have been playing Blood Bowl the way they've been playing it for decades, kind of thing. So it's not that you can't keep going, but it's going to become tougher. I know Armada's already pretty tough. I know when I sold out, about a year or so later, there was a local store near me where a bunch of people were playing Armada, and I was like, maybe. And I looked at it, I said, you know what? It's going to be too tough to get back in. I can get like some of the base stuff, but that's kind of about it. I'm not looking to 3D print my models or anything like that. So I just kind of steered away from it. I said, you know what? Yeah, there's a couple guys here, but is it worth that effort? For me, it wasn't. And I unfortunately think you're going to start seeing that. And there's some people who will just leave it behind because they're angry. Everyone has seen the video from Warhammer Fantasy of the guy who burned his Dark Elf army. He lit it all on fire. If you haven't seen it yet, go look for it. It's great. I'll try to put it in the show notes if I can. So, players are going to drop off to an extent. Product's going to drop off. Support, I don't care what they say. Support to a large extent, even from stores, are going to drop off. So it's going to become a problem. So one group is they keep playing. And you know what? There's probably some fan-made groups who are already working on it, who are going to come up with updates to rule systems for this and everything like that. You're going to see a 3.0 and see what they come out with. I know it happened for, say, Netrunner. There was another FFG product that I played a bunch of. Netrunner got a new edition and then got destroyed. But there's different groups that have worked on it. There was one big one, Nisei, and now I think it's someone else who actually took it over. I don't remember the name, but they release stuff on a semi-regular enough basis. You can get their stuff printed, all of that, and it's great. Honestly, I love playing Netrunner. But you don't find, like, it's not ubiquitous. You don't find it everywhere. And that's what's going to happen here. It's going to kind of start getting more regulated to the back. And that is a shame for anyone who plays it. And if this was your only miniatures game, keep playing. Playing at home, play with your friends, absolutely. But don't be surprised if the community kind of dwindles over time. I've seen it with Armada. We're fortunately probably going to see with this. Anytime a game goes away officially, you start to see it. I said for the reasons that I've stated as well, but you're going to see that to start to happen. So if you're a player, what does that mean for you? It means a few different things. One, like I said, you can keep playing. You can look to see fan content. I know Heroes of the Atari Cluster was a great campaign type. I'm pretty sure they updated it to 2.0, all of that. You're going to see fan-made stuff. It's Star Wars property. It's always going to be there to some extent. Do you keep doing it? Oh, that's really up to you. What I will say is, off the top of my head, for the current moment, I can't think of great replacements. Actually, I just kind of went around a little bit. Drop Fleet. Drop Fleet Commander is probably about the only big space game I can think of right now. There's a few other ones, like there's the Infinity one that I bought in for, but hasn't come out yet. So, but for ones out there right now, if you're looking for ship-based thing, Drop Fleet Commander is actually really good. I haven't played it quite a few years, but when I did play it, it was really good. And I know they've done some updates. Focus is a little bit different. It's much more focused on trying to get the troops to the ground. So it's trying to protect your troop transports and all of that. So a little bit different focused. But looking around, I'm seeing other ones that are like model agnostic. So more of like, here's a rule set, play what you want. So that's kind of a thing. There's obviously board games, the ISS Vanguard or all of that. But for actual miniatures games, there's ship fleet type games are kind of low right now. There's not a lot of them. Or like dogfight games. If you want dogfight ones, there's potentially some other options out there, but I don't see a lot of those, or at least a lot of those that I would say are popular. There's some different World War II style, like dogfighting games, but not ones that I can think of that have like the really big appeal. If someone can think of one, please post it in the notes, or if these are games you played, but you're looking at other games now, let me know what games you're looking at. I'm really curious, especially if it's something I don't know about. I'd love to take a look into it more. So let's talk about, I don't want to be very negative with this, so I'm going to avoid that to the big extent. So I'm going to avoid what I tell Dan doing of sitting on the fence, but I'm not going to hardline into anything too much. So if that's what you want to hear, there's other content creators who will do that. I want to talk a little about the kind of who's to blame here. So for anyone who doesn't know, if you're a first video watching this, I'm actually a college professor. So one thing that we find in education that comes around, and take whatever career you're in, same thing probably happens. But okay, students are not prepared. They're not. I teach math. They're not ready. There are some that are, but vast majority are not ready for the math. Okay, well, that's the problem with the high schools. And then you go to the high schools and you tell them, you're not getting our students ready. All right, well, we're doing our best that we can. But the problem is like the grade schools. The grade schools aren't doing enough. Say 8th grade or whatever, they're not doing enough. Okay, then you go talk to the teachers at 8th grade. Yeah, but when we're doing the best we can, in the upper building, the 6 to 8, but it's the primary schools that aren't getting the students to love education as much, whatever it may be. They're not getting them ready. And then you go down far enough and it becomes the parents' problem. And it's always to somewhere. And then the parents can blame their own upbringing. How many times do you hear, especially related to math, parents are like, I can't help my kid with homework. I don't know how to do this. I can't do, basic algebra or whatever it may be. There's always this sort of passing the buck, but it's all valid. None of that's wrong. The students aren't ready enough because of high school, which they're not ready enough because of, 6th, 7th, 8th, which aren't ready enough because of primary school, which aren't ready enough because of because of parents and where they came from, their all of that. It's not one spot for that blame. It's all over the place. And there's a little bit on all those different pieces. The same thing is here. I don't want to blame, I would never blame AMG entirely for this. I don't think that's true. And I've seen a lot of very negative things said about them. I understand. I don't think it's warranted. I think people need to step back and think about this logically for a moment. So AMG is a miniatures company that came up with Marvel Crisis Protocol, owned by Asmodee, and then were given 3 additional lines. Now, we know since they've come out with Shatterpoint. Let's be honest, with the amount of time it takes to put together a game, they were already putting that together. I don't know the exact timelines. I'm not an insider, but that was definitely something being worked on. It came out, what, a year or so ago, a little bit more than a year ago. That means it's been worked on probably for multiple years before. It was previewed a good bit before that, so it's been worked on for quite a while. Which means probably about the time they were shouldered with these Star Wars properties, that was a Star Wars property that they had been working on and getting together and really spending their time on. They're a small studio that went from having 1 game to having 3 games to then having 4 games, 3 new games, and then another. And let's face it, 3 out of 4 of their games that they originally had weren't theirs. So they essentially got the ball thrown at them and told to make this work. And we don't know all of the state at which they were handed them. It's obvious through some of the things I think that we've seen that FFG seems like they weren't really doing much with Armada. Because other than some of the separatists and clone stuff, because some of that came out under AMG's titling. But that's about where it ended. So they probably didn't have much else. X-Wing, we know they were going through doing releases of earlier ships, releasing them in 2.0 boxes. And we're sure they were working on a few other things, because anything they came out with in that first probably year to 2 years had been worked on by FFG. So, for better or worse, they essentially inherited it. So that's what their beginning releases were. Knowing the cycle's about 3 years, because that's about what they told us, you're talking about the last, year, maybe the last year and a half or a little bit more, that would be their own things. So they kind of got saddled with something, told to make the best of it, and they either, a few things, they might not have had the passion for it, because maybe, those just aren't the games that drove them. They might not have the manpower or resources to be able to develop them in the way that they needed. And depending on the current popularity and all of what they were inheriting kind of also determines, what do you put into this? Can you refresh it and grow it? Or do you not have the ability to do that and would have to sacrifice a lot more to do so? So I don't think the blame entirely rests on them. I do think, and they're controlled by another company, so maybe they couldn't. I think we should have known about some of this before. I think they should have said with Armada, like, we're not developing anything new and we're not going to. I think that's what most people expected, and they didn't. I think they left just enough hope. I think even with this announcement, I think they could go a lot more forward and say, okay, there's a there's a world championship in March of 2025. So is that done then? Is that the last thing they'll ever do? No more OP kits after that? Is it, we're going to keep doing it till when? And I understand they might not know that, but assuage some fears. Hey, we're getting rid of the game, and here's an idea of how long we're going to support or what type of support. I didn't get a video on this, but Steamforged Games recently bought War Machine, and they came out with a whole FAQ that explained, here's what's happening. Here's most of your questions, and we're going to get to the rest very soon. But here's a lot of questions answered, and I really appreciated that. I would have liked more information. This felt very much the way when FFG got rid of Star Wars Destiny, the DICE game, or Netrunner, all that kind of like, just can't do it. Now, for Netrunners, it was licensing. For Destiny, it was production. The problems were production. They're saying here it was as well. That's probably true. Do I think they could have done a non-pre-painted? No. I don't think it would have worked well. I think that's what people expected. That's what people saw. That's what got a lot of people in. It's the same reason a lot of board game players don't play miniatures games. Not all of them, but there's a lot that do, that don't, because that's not the experience that they want. They want to be able to take it, go to the table. Hey, it looks like an X-Wing. Good. I'm ready to play. So, and even at that, even if you cut off the cost of painting it, I don't I don't think that would have done it. I really don't. It was probably already kind of just going to fall apart. All right. Is FFG entirely to blame? No, of course not. But FFG is far from out of this when you try to think of what happened. You know, both of these games were their babies, and I don't think near the end they were stewarding them very well. Especially when it comes to Armada. They were taking, 6 months to a year between releases. When the Superstar Destroyer came out, that was like the only thing that entire year. You're not keeping a game going. You're not growing a community. You're not getting it to that critical mass you need if you're doing like a release a year. That's just not going to happen. So I think they had kind of dropped the ball to start with, and then AMG was told to pick it up. Is Asmodee entirely to blame? No, but they actually have parts of it. They could have, when they pulled it from the web store, told us. They could have helped AMG maybe increase. Sorry, still getting over a little bit of, I don't know, whatever I had that made it tough for me to talk for a while. They could have helped increase their funding to get more staff. They could have not done this. They could have kept it with FFG, or maybe split off a separate group that's going to work on some different Star Wars properties or whatever. They're kind of like the bag holder. And they, as a giant, company, essentially chose what made the most sense for them at the moment, probably fiscally, and not necessarily worried about property. So I put blame on all of them. I don't think anyone had ill intention, but I think this happened. I mean, X-Wing then lasted about 12 years. That is quite a good time. It's a shame that it's going away effectively to some extent, or that at least you're not going to see some brand new ships. But that did last quite a bit. But yeah, I think the problem started where it began, and it keeps going back. We could also, obviously, with any miniature games, you can also blame players to a small extent, because do you create a nice, warm, and welcoming environment? I think for this game they did. I do feel that way. But for the other games, there's always a little bit of that as well. Anytime you look somewhere and it's overly negative in that place, you see this more with GW games than other ones. But when you go on like the web and it's just tons of negativity, that does keep people out. So do keep that in mind. Whatever game you love, it's fine to be critical, but also make sure that you express the love that you have for it. I've been in some groups where every single post is about how awful everything is. Yeah, but you're here. If you're there, I know you care about it. Show a little bit of that too, because that's how you grow and create a community. That's how you get the support, and that's how you get, the fun of your investment and your time. Time is limited. I'm only going to spend time on the things that I enjoy and like. And personally, I wasn't a huge fan of some of the things they did with X-Wing. I liked the idea of like the missions overall. Just wasn't liking the squad building, all of that. So I just stopped because I only got so much time. I'm not going to spend my time on games that I'm kind of currently met on. So Legion. I think Legion's fine. They have shown us the releases they're doing this year. So partly, if you look at earlier in the year when they were announcing releases, they didn't really announce anything other than like a card pack for X-Wing. But Legion got shown like a unit for every faction and the things they're redoing, and they're redoing some of the old models in a better plastic. You're not going to do that if the game's going away. So it kind of feels like to me, they're keeping that as their large scale game. Then they have their 2 skirmish games. My hope is that AMG is doing no more other games. That's plenty. 3 games is plenty for a small studio. I would love to see Legion getting more releases, getting more support. It is being supported, but I'd love to see a bit more. The other 2 games are getting tons of support. So maybe that was the property that they thought they could do the most with and still have the most option. I said, partly with X-Wing, you've released so many models. How many more does like Disney let you do? Depending on that. So maybe they just kind of felt there wasn't as much. Same thing with the large ships. There's just not that many in current canon. But maybe with Legion, there's still a lot of units and pieces like that they could do. So, or, through, non-extended universe stuff, or however they want to put it. So if you're a Legion player, I think you're fine. If you played any of these games, I said, I do apologize. I think they are great games. I might not have been as big as fan of them, but I've lost games before, and I completely get it. When I was playing Guild Ball, they just ripped that away one day. You know, honestly, Firestorm Armada kind of went the same way. And yeah, when I think about this, there's been quite a few games where it's happened to me. Keyforge kind of did as well. Kind of looks like FFG has some problems. That one is back, although it lost all of its momentum and popularity as far as I can tell. So like I said, other things you might do. If you're planning on going to a different game, let me know. If you're going to keep playing this, if you got a great play group, let me know as well. I'm really interested to see that. I know around me that's not necessarily the case very much, but I know I'm not in the demographic of everywhere that people are. So I'm kind of curious if your community's kind of keeping the fire going. I want to know. So that's about that. Yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to say. What I'll say is of course, any time a well-known game goes away, or kind of stops getting the support and kind of, left to its own devices, it is a very sad day. If you are the type who, wants to keep supporting, like I said, try to look for some of those communities. I'm sure they're going to start showing up where you're going to get a lot of fan-made stuff. If you're super passionate about it, get involved in those projects. There's definitely going to be a lot of projects for people to overhaul and to alter things up and all of that. And like I said, if you're looking for another fleet game, Drop Fleet Commander is the main one that I can think of, and it is really, really good. And there's a lot of other board games ones out there, and then there's some ship ones, because ship and space for many games have the same sort of feel, very different looks, but same sort of feel. So it's a sad day in gaming. There's good, bad of other games. This is the last time. This is not going to be the last time that we see a game go away, and it's we're going to see many other games show up. Hopefully, people were able to have a lot of fun with this, and hopefully you keep having fun in whatever way you want to, whether it's playing this, going to a different game, or whatever it is that you happen to enjoy. All right, that's enough of this. So on behalf of everyone here at the show, then, have some good hobbying and some great gaming.